Welcome everyone to the Aspen Capital Management Social Security webinar. You're joined today by myself, Jake Taylor, and my fellow advisor, James Smith. If you were hoping to hear Mike today, or maybe one of your other favorites on the team, Katie or Lavia, maybe one of the folks from our ops team, sorry to disappoint, but James and I are excited to be here today to talk about Social Security, your benefit, and answer your questions. We hope that by the end of our discussion today, you all walk away with a better understanding of Social Security, how it applies to your specific benefit, and how your team here at Aspen Capital Management can help you get the most out of your benefit. So again, for anyone just joining, myself, Jake Taylor, and James Smith are going to be leading the discussion today on Social Security. Also, if you haven't joined a webinar for a while, you may see some new faces up on the screen here. Specifically on the right-hand side of your screen, Trevor Hotmer and Nate Berman. They joined Aspen Capital Management earlier this year in the spring. Nate as an operations associate working heavily on trading and cash management, and Trevor as a part-time intern throughout the summer, and now throughout the fall and the remainder of the school years, he finishes his degree in finance at Boise State University. We want to make sure that you're able to get the best viewing screen available today as we're walking through our slides. We'd encourage you to go up to the top right-hand side of your screen. There's going to be a little icon there that says View. You can select View and then hit Standard, which will bring you to the full screen option. And you can always exit the full screen by coming up here and hitting Exit Full Screen or hitting Escape on your keypad. Lastly, before we get into the details here of our conversation, we do want to encourage everyone to engage with us throughout the discussion. The best way to do that is going to be by using this chat bar or this chat box in the bottom bar along your screen. When you hit chat, you're going to be able to send a question in to either Aspen Capital Management or the questions co-host. We'd encourage you to please ask questions through the questions link and send in anything you have throughout the conversation to that attendee. We'll be able to see your question on our end. Your question will remain anonymous to the rest of the group, so please feel free to share that at any point. We'll be stopping a few times to address questions and then, of course, the end of our conversation. Today, we're going to be talking about three different areas of Social Security. We're going to dive into the basics so everyone gets a baseline understanding. We're then going to talk about building your Social Security strategy. And we're going to wrap up by answering some of the common questions that we receive and that many of you have probably read about in either researching Social Security or just hearing about it on the news. James is going to take it from here, and he's going to get us started with the basics of Social Security.
Great. Thanks, Jake. Before we get into discussing specific Social Security strategies, I think it's important that we have a good understanding of what Social Security is and how it works. So Social Security was initially designed as a type of insurance to cover older retirees, widows, and the disabled, and it still serves the same purpose today. And really, no matter what any of our opinions are on Social Security, what we do know for a fact is that it plays a huge role in the retirement success for the majority of Americans. And just to get a little specific, if we look on here, there's some very interesting statistics that come directly from the Social Security Administration. Specifically that for Americans over age 65, Social Security represents more than 50% of income for 50% of these people. And for that same demographic of Americans over age 65, Social Security represents over 90% of income for 20% of people. So I think it's safe to say that Social Security is relied upon more heavily today than was probably anticipated when it was first introduced. Really, this program was designed to only replace a portion of your wages and not be 90% of your income like we see it is for some people. We're not going to get into the weeds of how Social Security benefits are calculated. I don't think many of us would be interested in that. But what I think is important to know is that the wage replacement rate is heavily skewed toward to benefit lower income earners. And I have some of those specific numbers here. But I don't think you need to focus on these. Just focus that at lower incomes, 90% of income is replaced. And when you get into higher incomes, only 15% of income is replaced. And in that way, it's really designed to benefit lower income earners. So there's a few different types of Social Security benefits, but today we'll focus on a couple of the most common benefits. Social Security is much easier to understand with examples, I think. And so we'll get through some of the facts and then we'll get to an example. The first type of benefit applies to everyone. It's your own Social Security benefit. As is the case whenever you're talking about Social Security, there's a few important ages to keep track of that will determine when you're eligible to start and then how much of a benefit you'll actually receive. So you're eligible to start Social Security and get your full benefit at what's called your full retirement age, hence the name full retirement age. And for most people going forward, this age is age 67. And whenever we talk about Social Security, you're going to see full retirement age referenced frequently and even the abbreviation FRA. So that's when you get your full benefit, but age 62 is actually the earliest that you can claim. But by claiming early, you have to choose to accept a reduced benefit. And in fact, if we want to get into the specifics of that, if you choose to take your benefit as early as possible at 62, you'll see a 30% reduction from your full benefit. So a 30% reduction. And I know on the screen, we just have age 62, 67, and 70. You can actually choose to claim your benefit at any age in between, and you'll actually get that prorated amount down to the month. So for example, if you were to claim at age 63 in 5 months, you would get one benefit, but if you waited until 63 in 6 months, you would get a slightly larger benefit that would be prorated for that reduction. Every year that you wait after age 67, you get a guaranteed 8% increase in your benefit from full retirement age all the way up until age 70, which is kind of a big deal, right? An 8% increase. I don't know of any other investments out there right now that offer that type of guarantee. And so we see a lot of our clients taking advantage of this big benefit. The other type of benefit that applies to many of our clients is the spousal benefit. And you may have heard of this. This benefit allows you to receive up to 50% of your spouse's Social Security benefit. Where this can make a lot of sense is if one spouse earns significantly more money in their career than the other. And an important thing to remember with this that we sometimes see get confused is that taking a spousal benefit is not going to negatively impact that higher earning spouse in any way. It's not going to impact the amount of money that they receive. This is considered separate from it in that way. So we've talked a little bit about your own benefit and the spousal benefit. And just to summarize this and say it a little bit differently, everyone gets a choice. You can either choose to take your own Social Security benefit, or you can take 1/2 of your spouse's Social Security benefit, whichever one's bigger. And that's what's going to make sense, is whichever one is bigger for you. In order to be eligible to claim your spousal benefit, your spouse, the higher earning spouse, must have already claimed their benefit. So your spouse has to claim their benefit in order for you to be eligible to even access the benefit. But the amount of money you actually receive from a spousal benefit, so the amount that you get, is based off of your own age and not off your spouse's age. Just to double down a little bit, because a common misconception that we see people thinking is that they can claim a spousal benefit while their spouse still has not claimed. And I just want to reiterate, to be clear, you cannot claim a spousal benefit until the higher earning spouse has claimed their own benefit. And I know that this discussion can get a little jargony. And so this is where we're going to want to walk through a specific example. Here we have Tom, age 62. A lot of people tell Tom he's got a familiar face, but honestly, Jake and I can't really see it. So you can opine on that yourself. So here with Tom, we have his benefits that he would receive at given ages. And so at full retirement age, Tom would be eligible to take a $36,000 benefit. If he claims at age 62, he's going to have to accept a 30% reduction, and that would result in his benefit going to $25,200. And on the flip side, if Tom were to delay his benefit until age 70, then he's going to take advantage of that guaranteed 8% per year increase, and his benefit will see a substantial increase to $44,640. Now let's consider Tom's wife, Sandra, age 59, and her benefits. Sandra, she worked for a few years when they first got married, but hasn't had much earnings history since. And so you'll notice that her benefit, that her full retirement age benefit is quite a bit smaller than Tom's benefit. And if she has the same options to claim benefits early at age 62 and take that 30% decline or decrease, or she could maximize her own Social Security benefit by delaying until age 70 and taking advantage of the 8% increase. In Sandra's case, the largest benefit that she could receive is going to be the spousal benefit, which again, as a reminder, the max that you can get there is up to 50% of your spouse's full retirement age benefit, which in her case is $18,000. There's several other types of benefits that are less common for our clients, but I'll quickly touch on a couple that we do see on occasion. And now as we go through these, if you're not sure how these apply to you, but you think you might be eligible, then I would really encourage you to have a discussion with your advisor, because there's lots of little rules and nuances here and some unique planning opportunities that we would want to make sure we don't miss, right? So the first is the divorced spousal benefit. This looks very similar to the spousal benefit we just discussed, where you can get up to 50% of your ex-spouse's full retirement age benefit. Basically, if you're currently unmarried, but you have a prior marriage that lasted for more than 10 years, then you're likely eligible for a spousal benefit from your ex. And that's what this benefit is. The next is the survivorship benefit, which this benefit allows you to get your deceased spouse full benefit, not just half like the spousal benefits we've talked about so far. You can get that full benefit. And so if your spouse passes away before they took Social Security, there's a few specific rules and ages to be aware of. But if you think this applies to you, then again, really talk to your advisor about how to maximize your benefits, because there are some nuances here, and there are probably the most important planning items with this survivorship benefit. And as a quick aside, you may also qualify for a survivorship benefit if your ex-spouse passes away and your marriage had lasted for more than 10 years. So just something else to be aware of. So we actually do see survivorship benefits fairly frequently when we think about later in life. When we're talking about before Social Security age, we don't see it too frequently. But when we're talking about survivorship benefits when both spouses have already claimed Social Security benefits, that is pretty common. And when you think about it, this makes sense because at some point in life, someone in a marriage is likely to be a widower, right? Both spouses rarely die at the exact same time. And so once you've claimed Social Security benefits, survivor benefits are pretty simple, actually, which is nice. When we're talking about Social Security, many things aren't simple, but this is super simple. The surviving spouse, when one passes away, the surviving spouse always gets to keep the higher benefit. They can't keep both benefits, but they get to keep the higher benefit of the two. Now we'll stop for a second just to check on questions. Jake, have we gotten any questions?
We've got one here that came in. And James, the question I'm seeing here is, what is the maximum Social Security benefit possible?
Oh, that's a great question. So for the maximum Social Security benefit for 2023 is around $3,600. And that's if you were to take it at full retirement age. And so if I do the math on that, $3,600, if you were to delay until age 70 and take advantage of the 8% increase, that would end up being a max benefit at age 70 of $4,500 a month. We got another question that just came in.
Yeah, look, give us just a second. We're reading through a few of these questions.
So great question on divorce. So the question says, in case of divorce, can the spouse claim the 50% full retirement age benefit right away, or does the other spouse have to claim first? This is a great question. And unfortunately, in the cases of divorce, the government has designed it in a logical way where you don't have to coordinate anything with your ex-spouse. Your ex-spouse has to be of Social Security age, so they have to at least be 62, but it doesn't matter if they've claimed their own benefit or not. They just have to be age 62, and then you also have to be Social Security age in order to take it. but you don't have to coordinate with them. You don't have to talk with them. And taking that divorced spousal benefit isn't going to affect them or notify them or affect their future spouse in any way. Great question. Anything else, Jake, that's come in?
Not right now. I think we can keep going for now, James. If we get any more, I'll make a note of them and we'll bring them up in our next section.
Okay, great. And just as a reminder for everyone, if you have questions, submit them to the questions co-host that you'll see. That's where we'll see them. Okay. So now to get a little bit into the specific Social Security strategies. I think as we've talked through this, it's easy to see that there's no one size fits all strategy. Finding the right strategy is something that really needs to be individualized off of you, and if you have one, your spouse. But now we'll get into some of the major considerations and factors that play into picking that optimal Social Security strategy. We'll also talk through, we'll revisit our friends, Tom and Sandra, and talk through a more detailed example there. So the single biggest factor for Social Security and when to claim is always going to be life expectancy. If you can tell me exactly when you'll die, then I can tell you exactly when to claim Social Security. Really, in reality, we know that's not the case. So what we have to do is try and make the most informed decision we can based off of your current health, based off of your family history of your parents and your grandparents. And since it's based off of health and life expectancy, we also can't make this decision 10 years in advance, right? We need to see where you're at as you approach Social Security. But it's also important for us to consider the data that we have on life expectancy today. So here we have an interesting chart on life expectancy. At the horizontal axis, it's showing us different ages. The vertical axis is showing us the probability that a couple is alive at these different ages. And so this dark blue shaded area here is showing us the probability that both spouses are alive at different ages. And what I find pretty interesting is when we look out at the lighter blue shaded area, which is representing the probability that only one spouse is alive at different ages. And to call out specifically age 80, because I find it pretty interesting, is that age 80, there's a 90% probability or likelihood that at least one spouse is still alive, right? And as you get out, it's still, I think another big takeaway is that for a married couple, odds are pretty good that one of you will live into your upper 80s and early 90s. So what does this mean for Social Security? The nice thing about Social Security strategies is there's really only three when it comes to a couple, three options. One can delay, both spouses can delay, or neither spouse can delay. And this graphic here is sort of a decision tree when we're looking at these options. And on the horizontal axis here, we can see the husband's life expectancy, and on the vertical axis, the wife's life expectancy. And theoretically, this is obviously a more oversimplified version than what it looks like in reality and the considerations to consider. But this is helpful to look at, to say, if you plug in a husband's life expectancy and the wife's life expectancy, you can see what might be that ideal claiming strategy. And if you remember on this last chart over here, that it's a 90% probability that at least one spouse is alive at age 80. And we can see that if you think that at least one of you is going to live past age 80, then it makes sense for one of you to delay. And it actually doesn't matter which spouse you expect to live the longest. As far as who should delay, the higher earner should always be the one to delay if only one spouse delays. And you can see up here in this top right corner, and if we look at the life expectancies that correlate to this green shaded area, it's kind of around 90 or lower 90s. And so if you think that both of you will live into your upper 80s, lower 90s, then it may make sense for both spouses to delay. And now seeing the probabilities, we know this is not the most common strategy. The most common strategy is going to be that only one spouse delays, but we do see this with our clients where both do delay. What we don't see very often is that neither delay. This can make sense, but it is pretty rare because you have to be fairly confident. You have to be really confident that neither spouse is going to live past age 80. And we just don't see that very often because, again, it's a 90% likelihood that at least one of you is going to live to age 80. So life expectancy is by far the most important consideration in making a decision, but it's not the only consideration. Remember, at its core, Social Security is a form of insurance. I think it's helpful to maintain this framework when you're considering the optimal strategy for you. Like, what's your biggest fear in retirement? Is your biggest fear leaving some money from Social Security on the table and leaving money on the table with the government? Or are you really concerned that you just need money right now and that your portfolio can't sustain you for the next couple of years? If that's the case, that's something you would want to talk to your advisor about, right? And if that is the case, it may make sense to take your benefit early and not delay. Take your benefit sometime between age 62 and 66. But on the flip side, if you're really concerned about outliving your money and that one or both of the spouses might live into their upper 80s or early 90s, then it may lead you to do the opposite, right? If you're concerned about high inflation for an extended period of time, or you think that you might go through a period of below average, a long period of below average portfolio returns in the future, then this might tip the scales, all things being equal, towards delaying and maybe waiting at least to age 67, if not all the way to 70. I think it's helpful to look at an example here as well on what it looks like in real life on these delaying characteristics and how Social Security can help protect against some of these. So high inflation is a big one. And I think a lot of people are cognizant of that right now. Social Security just announced the official cost of living adjustment for 2022, and it's 8.7%. It's the highest it's been in a really long time. So 8.7%. Every Social Security benefit is going to get an 8.7% increase to get that inflation adjustment. Now, if you delayed your benefit to 70, you already got an 8% automatic increase, right? A guaranteed increase. And now in the future, you're going to get this cost of living adjustment of 8.7% this year and whatever it is in the future. You get that cost of living adjustment off of a larger Social Security benefit. And so there's certainly a compounding effect over your lifetime of where that works in your favor. Now, I want to jump into that case study of Tom and Sandra and their situation. These benefits look the same as we reviewed earlier, but as we go through this, I want you to be thinking to yourself about what Tom and Sandra's strategy should be. Should one delay? Should both delay? Or should neither delay? So again, we have Tom and Sandra's benefits that we already reviewed, but here are some other characteristics about Tom and Sarah. Tom is reasonably healthy, but no one in his family has lived past age 80, so he doesn't have a long life expectancy. Meanwhile, Sarah is very healthy, and both of her parents are still alive at age 97. Her grandparents lived into their upper 90s. She thinks she has a great aunt that lived to like 103. So she thinks she's going to live for quite a long time. In addition, Tom and Sandra have seen everything going on over the past couple of years with inflation, and they're pretty concerned about wanting to be protected in some way against above average inflation in retirement. And so that's something that they've mentioned is important to them. What do you think might be the best strategy? When we look through this and all these considerations, we really think it makes the most sense and would recommend to Tom and Sandra that Tom delays all the way until age 70 and takes advantage of that guaranteed 8% increase to get his benefit up to $44,640, right? For Sandra to claim her benefit as soon as possible. So her benefit, it would be $7,000, but claiming at 62, which is as soon as possible, would reduce her benefit to $4,900. And you might remember with the spousal benefit, that's what she's going to want to be on long-term because it's the largest benefit. She can't take her spousal benefit until Tom claims at age 70. And so she'll be, if we do the math with them, she'll be 67 before she can switch to the spousal benefit. But since she claimed her own benefit early, she's going to get a reduced spousal benefit, which when we do the math ends up being $11,700. Why this makes sense, though, even though Tom might not live until age 80, let's assume Tom claims his benefit at age 70 and he passes away at 75. In that case, Sandra will no longer be taking these benefits and she'll just inherit and take over Tom's larger benefit and she'll have that for the rest of her life. And that's why it doesn't matter actually which spouse is going to live the longest. It just makes sense to defer that larger benefit. I think as we walk through this, it's easy to see the complexity here, right? And a lot of our clients come up with lots of questions in relation to Social Security. There's lots of questions that do come up, and Jake's going to walk through some of the most critical ones.
Yeah, thanks, James. And before we get into some of the questions that we've thought about ahead of time to share with you, we did get some more questions come through in our chat feed. We got a really good question about the COLA increase coming for 2023. The specific question was, will the max benefit at full retirement age be increased by 8.7%? And so for those of you who maybe saw the news or maybe haven't seen it, the COLA increase to Social Security benefits for 2023 is 8.7%. And that 8.7% benefit or benefit adjustment applies to not just people currently taking Social Security, but also to people who haven't yet claimed. So they will the Social Security Administration will adjust your benefits regardless of whether you've claimed or you haven't claimed, and regardless of whether what size your benefit is.
Yeah, great point, Jake. One last question. We'll take more questions at the end, but before Jake goes on with some of the common questions we see, a question we got is about the divorce benefits again. If you're divorced and you've since remarried, does that change things? Yes, once you remarry, then you can't claim a divorce spousal. You can only claim with your new spouse. Great question. All right, Jake, take us away.
All right. Well, there's no doubt, and some of you probably see this coming, but the most common question that we receive around Social Security is, will Social Security run out of money? And is it going away? So when we think about this, it makes a lot of sense that people have this question because we consistently hear about it in the financial news. You see big, bold headlines, seems like, especially around this time of year, every year you're going to hear headlines that Social Security is going away, it's running out of money, how much time is there before benefits run out? And so it's a natural question that people have of, should I take this into account in my financial plan and in my life? And there's no doubt that, these headlines do come from some legitimate concerns that people have. And that really centers around the fact that America is getting older. The number of Americans aged 65 and older today in 2022 is 58 million. By 2035, that's expected to be 76 million. That's quite a big increase. That's an increase of 18 million people above the age of 65 and claiming Social Security benefits in just over a decade. And so that creates a strain on funding and the benefits being paid out. However, these challenges, they're not new. If you're looking at the screen here on the right side of your screen, all of these past presidents have dealt with these challenges, as well as both parties of Congress, and they have made changes and made updates historically to keep Social Security solvent. So what we want to focus on is talking about why we believe Social Security is here to stay and why you should factor Social Security into your financial plans. So the first point here is this pay-as-you-go system. And understanding how Social Security is funded is the first step in understanding, why it's here to stay. And the important statistic here is that 90% of benefits paid out are funded by current year tax revenue. So again, that's 90% of benefits paid are funded by current year tax revenue. That means that only the remaining 10% is funded by the Social Security Reserve Fund. And that reserve fund that I just mentioned is what, when you hear headlines of the media talking about Social Security going away, that's what they're concerned about. But rarely is it ever mentioned that 90% of benefits paid out are funded by the current taxpayers. And so we think it's, unlikely that in future years, changes won't be made, and historically they have been made to ensure that all benefits can be paid out. This second bullet point here is economic dependency. And we talked about this a little bit at the beginning of our conversation, but the fact that so many people rely upon Social Security in retirement is really the second main reason why it's unlikely that it's just going to go away anytime soon. So James brought up this amazing stat that 50% of Americans age 65 and older rely upon Social Security for more than 50% of their income. And for 20% of Americans age 65 and older, they rely on Social Security for 90% of their income. So we have tens of millions of Americans who rely on their Social Security benefits, and our economy relies on those people receiving their benefits. To wrap up, and this one, it's kind of a fun point and an interesting point here, but it's politicians. And you can see here on the right side of your screen, if we look back at just our previous 6 presidents across the board, regardless of political party, and this goes for Congress too, regardless of party, there is rarely anyone or at any time where benefits have ever been scaled back. In fact, they're usually just adding to benefits and finding ways to ensure funding for current retirees on their Social Security benefits. Social Security was founded in the 1930s, and across the board, even before, we're going back only to Reagan right here, but even before that, this really was the case. And while changes have had to be made over time, it really has not been to take away the benefits from the individual. It's been small changes to the individual to fund the entire collective program. So to really wrap up this slide, the dependency of Americans on Social Security, the way that Social Security is funded, and then the political incentives to keep this gravy train flowing and keep benefits funded, make it very difficult to imagine a near-term scenario where Social Security funds are not provided to those currently receiving their benefits or those soon to be receiving their benefits. Moving on here, the natural follow-up question we often receive is, will I get my full benefit? So, sure, I understand that Social Security might be here to stay, but to what extent might it be changed going forward? And I think the key point here for us to understand and for us to talk through is that for most people currently receiving Social Security, and those who are going to soon be receiving Social Security, say you're over the age of 50, and that's most of the listeners on this call, your benefits are likely to not be changed significantly. But for those of you who are younger, let's talk about what changes might happen and what things have been changed historically. So the government has a few powerful levers that they can use to alter the way Social Security benefits are calculated and taxed. We begin at the top of our pyramid. You're going to see this qualifying age box. With Americans living longer, a natural adjustment to Social Security would be to increase the full retirement age or the ages at which benefits can be claimed. So you'll see currently you can claim your benefits between ages 62 and 70, like James talked about, and the full retirement age for many people claiming Social Security now, some of you it might be a bit younger, but is 67. And in the past, this has been changed and it's been moved up as life expectancy has increased. This was changed in 1983, for example. So we wouldn't be surprised if in the future we saw some changes here. If we look at the base of our pyramid, this is where we move into the issue of means testing Social Security. Social Security is already heavily means tested, both on the income that you earn and the benefits paid. So if we focus here on this left-hand side of the screen, the simple point is that you pay the full Social Security tax on income up to $147,000 in 2022, but your benefits accrue at a lower percentage above different income breakpoints. And so James walked through that at the beginning, but if we look at this going forward, this is something that has been changed in the past. And again, we wouldn't be shocked to see some changes if Social Security needed some additional funding. Lastly, this benefit tax here on the right-hand side, this is the benefits that are paid out. So different from the income that's being taxed when you're working, but now that you're retired and you're receiving benefits, how much of your Social Security benefit is subject to tax. Currently, that's 85% for most individuals and for most of our clients. We could definitely see changes. And again, in the past, they've made changes here to this benefit tax where more of your benefit is subject to taxation. Now, I want to pause there and bring up the point that, again, it's unlikely that these changes significantly impact anyone on this call. James, I actually have a question for you here, and I didn't tell him what the answer to this is beforehand. So this is a guess for him, but what do you think the average age is of a listener on this webinar?
Not including us, I'm guessing 62.
62. Okay, you're off. It's right in between 65 and 66. So you're looking at about 65 and a half. It's the average age of listeners on this call. And I bring that up because the point is, in the past, the government has not made significant changes to those about to receive their benefits or currently on them. But for someone like James and I, who have quite a ways until retirement, we might be in trouble. We are going to be doing our best to fund your benefits. We could see some changes where, potentially more of our income is subject to taxes, or we see some small benefit decreases. This last slide here that we have before we wrap up our conversation is, how do I apply for Social Security benefits? This is pretty quick. Our first one here is, when do I file? We'd recommend 3 months before you'd like to begin receiving benefits. How do I file? You can do this in 3 ways: online at ssa.gov, ssa.gov. This is the recommended option for most filers. Now, if you have a more complicated situation, say you're claiming divorce benefits or survivorship benefits, you're going to want to either go in person to your local office or call up Social Security and talk to them over the phone. Lastly, most importantly, when do I get paid? So this one here is a little bit of a technicality: the month following the benefit start date. So for example, if you select your benefits to start in November of 2022, you would get your first paycheck at the beginning of December. That wraps up kind of our common questions section that we receive. Let's actually jump to some of the questions that have come in so far throughout the remainder of the presentation. We have less of a question, but more of a comment. A funny comment here from one of the listeners: thank God for pandering politicians. It's a fair point. No politician wants to be the one to tell you that they're taking your Social Security benefits away. James, anything else that you have seen come through?
Yeah, there's one about, what is the break-even age for claiming Social Security for an individual, not for a married couple? That's a good question. I mean, it is dependent on the situation. When we run the math, it usually, this break-even of when does it make sense to have delayed compared to not having delayed. When we're talking about an individual, it's usually around age 81 or 82. So if you're going to live past 81 or 82, then that's when you should have delayed compared to having taken your benefit early. When we talk about couples, I know you didn't ask about couples, but it gets way more nuanced just because it depends on how close in age the couple is and the size of their benefits and just a lot of things. So I couldn't give as good of an answer there, but that's how it is for individuals.
Great. Anything else, James?
No, we don't have any other questions.
Well, everyone, thank you for taking the time and letting us run a bit over. We appreciate all the questions and the engagement. I know we scheduled this for 30 minutes, but it was great to talk with everyone today about Social Security. The last thing we wanted to share is our upcoming Medicare webinar on November 17th. So it'll be Thursday, November 17th. We'll keep that one a little bit shorter, but again, another great topic that impacts all Americans. So we look forward to talking about that then. Thank you all for joining us today.